Hardcore matches are just part and parcel of this crazy industry. You don't have to like them, but they're not going anywhere. I think we forget how dangerous they can be just because we have become overexposed to them. I mean, just go and look at some of the stuff happening on the indie scene. It will make you scared in your tum-tum. AEW has sort of rewritten this in a way too, because they have taken some of this madness and put it on the big screen. That just means today, we can get in our time machine, and I'm going to bring you 10 hardcore matches that are totally, wotally crazy. Are you ready? I'm ready. Let's go. 10, an eye for an eye. That's right, we start with WWE. You didn't see that coming. This was knee-deep during the pandemic though, so I do understand it on one hand. This one right here, everything was so nuts. You had to come up with some new ideas. But I don't think anybody was expecting a match where the goal was to literally get somebody's eyeball out of their seeing device. So yes, it wasn't a figurative term. WWE meant it literally, and it happened at the ridiculously named pay-per-view, Extreme Rules the Horror Show, and it was Seth Rollins versus Rey Mysterio. Now, I understand Seth being in this, because at the time he was kind of like playing an unhinged cult leader, but Rey Mysterio has been like the most babyface since he was born into this world. What are we doing? I mean, there was no way the Masked Man was ever going to go, oh yeah, cool, I'll just go rip out his pupil. And also, when Seth won this, because he used some of the still steps in order to, I don't know, I guess make Rey blind, he basically threw up everywhere. So even though they both agreed to go into it, when they actually pulled the trigger, they were disgusted. Now listen, on the one hand, this really made me laugh, but also, it's really stupid. Number 9, Arcade Anarchy. Early AEW is so damn nuts. It's one of the reasons I loved it so. This was exactly what it sounded like too, because the best friends took on Miro and Kip Sabian in a makeshift would-be arcade. I mean, if you had sort of turned the corner and you had seen Mario Kart or Street Fighter, nobody would have been surprised. So there was certainly an entertainment factor to this. But if you go back and watch it now, it is actually quite brutal. And we also had that whole spot where you go, oh no, it's thumbtacks. I'm kidding, it's Legos. Listen, some people raise their eyes at this. Have you ever stood on a Lego? It's like walking on glass. All the other electronics were totally destroyed as well, and you get the big return pop at the end of this, because Chris Statlander does make her big AEW comeback, and she essentially saves the day. The stuffed alien from Toy Story also pops up during this. So if you're sat there one day and you feel a little bit sad, you should put this on, and a magical smile will come across your face. Number 8, Lights Out. So modern day wrestling loves this. There was a time where nobody talked about it, and then, I don't know, I guess one promoter went, hang on a second, back in the day we used to do this all the time, so let's bring it back in 2022, 23, 24, and no doubt 2025. NXT was the same, but bless this brand. They have such personality. They did announce they were going to do a Lights Out match, but once again, they meant it literally, because they had Wendy Chu, and her gimmick was she liked to sleep, so the lights were going to be out, so essentially she could take a nap. And I know this stuff gets people so mad, but I totally loved this. Always give me the nonsense. Tiffany Stratton also got thrown in here too, where she was basically attacked with pillows and pink Legos, because that tied into her character. Once again, don't get mad at me, I didn't write it. So it really is just silly entertainment. While I would understand the argument, well, this didn't really work, yeah, fine, that's cool, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. As I always say, we get so much wrestling in a calendar year. Sometimes just go bonkers. Number 7, the Anus Explosion Deathmatch. So yes, you heard that correctly. Don't like stick your fingers in your ears. We are about to be talking about explosions that go into your tuchus. The objective of this match is exactly what you would think too, where you had to, take a firework and stick it into somebody's butt and then set it on fire and make sure it explodes. And actually, when you think about it like that, that is somewhat scary. You could actually die. Of course, it came from Japanese promotion FMW, who for whatever reason loved this stuff, where it saw Hayabusa essentially taking on Hayabusa, because the other character was meant to be his doppelganger. The problem we had here, though, is that of course we had to work it, because it is pro wrestling. So the fans that had flocked to the arena to see this, well, they thought there was going to be a big pyrotechnic display, and instead it was just a sparkler. It wasn't actually that violent. If you want to break it right down and you're a little bit weird, it was mostly kinky. Now this was for the best, because again, I don't want to see that on my television, but it was not what was advertised. So yeah, if you are going to talk about weird hardcore matches, Well, in retrospect, that should probably have been number 1. Number 6, the King of the Road match. So WCW was always hilarious, not just in the year 2000, because they always had such grand ideas, it didn't really have the budget to back it up. It's what brought us to the uncensored pay-per-view in 1995, where Dustin Reynolds and the Blacktop Bully actually fought on the back of a truck that was speeding down the highway. Now, I've said speeding, that's a massive lie, and it's actually point 1 that I do want to talk about. That thing was going so slow that any danger was kind of pinged out the window. They're also scrapping in this cage that was on the back of the thing. I guess it was meant to be inspired by Mad Max, but when we tried to execute this, well, it just didn't work. Very sadly, it got panned in the dirt sheets. Now, once again, I didn't want anyone to get really hurt here. And if we had done what people thought they were gonna do, somebody likely would have died. When you do try and watch it as a, oh my gosh, wrestling match, well, nothing much happens because you can't fight on the back of a moving truck. I mean, it stands to reason. But as ever, bless WCW. Number 5, a dungeon match. So if only this had been what we would presume a dungeon is, which is essentially a lair where a dragon lives. It was not, though, and instead we were talking about Stu Hart's dungeon. That's when the first issue cropped up, because so many wrestlers would talk about this place like, oh man, it's like hell on earth, and I hate it. And then we put Ken Shamrock and Owen Hart in a match in this room. That's the word. That's the literal word. It was just a room, and everybody was a little bit like, ha. This went down at In Your House Fully Loaded in 1998. And actually, it kind of changes tact when you do watch it, because these two guys whipped each other's ass, and also it was fought under submission rules. At one point, Shamrock's head just goes colliding into the wall, and that looks horrible. So while visually it's not that appealing, when you actually focus down on the work, yeah, it's not that bad at all. You also have to look at the timeline here, because again, it was in 1998, so this was only a few months after the controversial Bret Hart exit. Kind of surprised it was even allowed. So I wouldn't do this again because I think it was a one and done. But in terms of trying to be a little bit creative and tap into something that nerd fans knew about, yeah, I'll just say it again, it's not that bad at all. Number 4, the Chamber of Horrors. So we have talked about this one a lot, and that's because it's totally wild. We do have to go back to 1991's Halloween Havoc, courtesy of WCW, and look at this flipping lineup. Because it was indeed Sting, the Steiners, and El Gigante, or El Gigante, how you pronounce his stupid name, taking on Cactus Jack, Vader, the Diamond Stud, and Abdullah the Butcher. And because it was a spooky time of year, yeah, we went and stuck them in the Chamber of Horrors. Now, sadly, while this should have been so bad it's good, it's not, it's just really dull, it's really long, and the cage we constructed here, well, it just looks a bit crap. It also meant we had to have toy caskets, shrunken heads, and of course the big electric chair, and that's how you won the match. You had to stick somebody in it and electrocute them. So if we had been doing ups and downs back then, we absolutely would have brought down the crime counter. Now, poor Abdullah the Butcher was the dude that was told you're gonna have to do this, and he was clearly against it. Because when Cactus Jack flips the switch, Abdullah basically goes and vibrates for a little bit. You then get a terrible pyrotechnics display when Abdullah just gets up and he walks off. He doesn't sell it at all. So he's really bad. It's just terribly bad. And once again, I appreciate the creativity, but listen to this bald a-hole, don't watch it. Number 3, the Kennel from Hell. So you knew this was coming. In many ways, it's one of the wildest things the WWF ever did. Now, the story is massively important here, so I would try and fill you in like Craig David. But the big boss man had kidnapped Al Snow's dog Pepper when he said to Alan, "Why don't you come to my hotel room for a meal?" And while Snow decided to do this, I will never know. Because when they did sit down to have some dinner, the big boss man started to laugh because, ha ha ha, you have just eaten your pooch. Which means the boss man had not only killed this pup, but he had turned him into some sort of beef. Once again, I would pull down the crime counter and absolutely send him to jail. For some reason, that then meant we had to have the Kennel from Hell in a Cell match at Unforgiven 1999. And talk about pure PTSD, even though within the worlds of kayfabe, WWF knew that Al Snow had lost his pet, we still made him do this gimmick. We always had a bunch of dogs around ringside, but the dogs didn't know they were on WWF pay-per-view. So instead of being threatening, they just pooped everywhere and had sex. It was just such a terrible idea and did come from the mind of Vince Russo, who sometimes went, well, wrestling isn't very good if it's just wrestling. Well, I sat through this and I will tell you this, Vince, You were totally wrong. This was rubbish. Number 2, Judy Bagwell on a forklift. So Vince Russo is back again. What the flub? Now I do find it hard to get mad at this one, because sometimes I wake up on a brand new day and it just makes me laugh. That's how silly it was. But yes, at the WCW New Blood Rising pay-per-view, which is terrible from start to finish, we did Canyon versus Buff Bagwell, with Buff Bagwell's mum hanged in the air on a forklift. You tell me. And the story here is totally wild too, because Canyon had kidnapped this woman, so why the hell were WCW officials green-lighting this? And if you're also questioning, well, why wasn't it on a pole? Because Vince Russo loved on a pole matches. Well, apparently, he thought the ha-ha, lol, funny was that Judy was a little bit overweight and a pole wouldn't hold her. So I'm sorry, that's just straight up insulting. You can also tell that Mrs. Bagwell didn't want to be there, probably because she wanted to be sat at home with some cocoa. Just look at the image. That's all you need to do. Look at it. That could be the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm an idiot. So yes, you're probably now going, Simon, this isn't really a hardcore match and it's more of a dumb stipulation match. Well, Canyon and Buff still use some weapons. If I can talk about it, I'm always going to talk about it. Number 1, the Invisible match. I mean, bless wrestling. What a wild ride. Now, this was part of the 2010 indie boom when all of a sudden a lot of promotions decided, why don't we be really ironic when it comes to sports entertainment? In many ways, it's how GCW made a name for itself. Because they did indeed book the Invisible Man versus the Invisible Stan, and actually you probably know the referee here. It was Bryce Remsburg, who has now made a name for himself in All Elite Wrestling. He had to carry this whole thing, and he's actually really entertaining, but you have to give a round of applause to the fans too, because they sold this like they could actually see 2 human beings, even though obviously there was no one there, and at one point they're recalling horror, because yes, we were pretending that they were using weapons. You also get a bunch of 1-2 oohs and near falls that the crowd go nuts for as well. So I love this because it just stands to reason. If we are going to enter this creative world of nonsense, why don't we just open the door for everything and step on through? And you wanna know why? Because it's damn fun. And I do want to point out, I understand it's not for everybody, but just turn it off, because I can tell you from deep down in my Tootsie Toes, well, I absolutely love it. Now, of course, please do get in those comments below and let me know about the dumbest hardcore matches that have ever happened. I actually think if I was going to switch this list around, I probably would put Eye for an Eye at number 1. Why would you want to rip somebody's eye out? Also, please like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Click the video on the screen, which is me regaling you with yet more wrestling trivia. But otherwise, my friends, have a terrific day. See you soon.